Welcome to this lecture on importing modules and using methods. Before we get on to importing modules, I just want to go over what exactly a method is. So Python already has built-in methods, some of which we've already been over. So for example, when we want to convert, let's say, an integer to a string, we use this method. We just put str and then with brackets around it. We can also use some things. For example, we used type, if you remember in one of the previous lectures. So we could just put in lecture here, and that would return the type of the data. So there are other things we could do. For example, you can use length, which is this is a word. We'll return how many characters is in this string. So we have all these built-in methods. So methods is just a way of carrying out something. Now modules, and sometimes what we might refer to as libraries, are basically a big collection of methods that are useful for a specific purpose. Sometimes you have to install them, but actually we've already got a lot that we can just use by importing. So for this, I'm going to as an example, I'm going to use the random module. So all I have to do is write import random. So now we have all of the methods available to us from random. So let's look at one now. If I type in random and then put a dot, and then if you're using Jupyter Notebooks, you can press tab. If you're not, you won't have this available. But when I press tab, so it comes up with all the different methods that I could use. So these are all the different methods that are available in the random module. So if I just search for that now, I can just put in Python random module. Here we go. We get the Python documentation. There are also some good articles here. For example, Python for beginners, telling you how you can use a random module. But here's all the documentation. The Python documentation, it can be a bit tough to get through. But let's look at one. Okay, here's a good one. Random.randint. Sorry. So that stands for random integer. Returns a random integer such that it's between A and B. So let's give that one a try. So let's see if we can find it here. Randint. Fantastic. And we can just type it out as well. So random.randint, and then in brackets we want it to be between 10 and 20. So if I do that, it's going to be 12, try again 18. It's always going to be completely random what number it's going to be. So we always have to have it says here, missing one required positional argument. So we need to have two arguments within the method. Let's say we want it to be between 10 and 200,000 or 2 million. So you get the idea. So basically, random has a number of different methods within its module. So we can import random. If we wanted to just import, so the next thing we want to do is import as. So sometimes it's easier, or you prefer to refer to it as something other than random. So import random as rn, for example. Then all I'm doing is saying import the module random, but I want to call it rn. So now, if I try to do this, for example, as rn, that would still work because I've basically imported it and I want to call it rn. So we can import random just as it is, or we can rename it if we want. There's one other thing we can do. It kind of saves on memory. We can say from random, and then we just want to import just one method, so import randint. So now that we've done that, we don't need to put in random.randint, we can just put randint. So there are loads and loads of useful Python modules, and the way that most people just discover them is by typing in Python useful modules, or something like interesting modules, and it comes up with things like this: 20 Python libraries you can't live without. So what I highly recommend that you do after this lecture is just take a look at all the different modules that there are out there. So for example, this article will probably be quite helpful. It tells you about things like requests, so that's for using HTTP, which we'll get onto in a little while. Beautiful Soup, NumPy, which is used for more sort of mathematical things, which you can't just get from the basic stuff you get in Python. Matplotlib you can use for plotting graphs and stuff like that. But for now we're just going to stick to random just to give it a try. So definitely after this lecture, have a try at importing random. So all you need to do to try and do it is just write import random and then type random.randint, which stands for random integer, and then say between 1 and 10 or whatever you want. And then you'll be able to get your random numbers. And you could also store that in a variable. So I'm just going to call it randvar. I print off randvar. There we go. If I print this off again, it will be the same number. I have to run this cell again for it to change, of course. Fantastic. So in this lecture, we've been over what methods are. So they're basically useful functions that we can have. We've been over a few that are already built into Python. And then we looked at how we can import a module in different ways. So we looked at how we could just import it just by writing import random. We looked at how we could import just one method from the module. And then we looked at how we could import it and rename it at the same time by doing import random as new name or something like that. So that's importing modules in a nutshell. Once you get really good at Python, you'll actually be able to create your own modules that you can then import. And actually we'll be doing that when we get more into machine learning and integrating that into our websites. So, but for now, just focus on importing the random module, play around with a bit, and once you're feeling confident, I'll see you in the next lecture.